Welcome to the Digital Amateur Television Experimenters Night. This is VK7OTC, the club station of the Radio and Electronics Association of Southern Tasmania. Amateur radio is a worldwide hobby that has many different aspects. Digital television is just one of the many modes and areas that are covered. Maybe you're interested in becoming involved in the DATV Experimenters Nights. Do you realise that you do not have to be a radio amateur or need any ATV equipment to participate anywhere in the world? Also participate in the night by coming up to the Queen's Domain club rooms. Yes, right on top of the Queen's Domain in the heritage-listed Coast Wireless Station. You never know, we might get you in front of the camera or behind doing one of the many roles during the night. We get underway with our program on a Wednesday night from 7:30pm local time. We'll see you soon. This is VK7OTC.
All yours. Well, welcome. Good evening. This is VK7OTC, the club station of the Radio and Electronics Association of Southern Tasmania, with our Digital Amateur Television Experimenters Night. And this episode is number 16 in our Working from the Shack series that happens every second Wednesday of the month. Now, to our viewers, a reminder. People watching can call in and make comments and ask questions via repeater 2, also DMR group 3807, and the Reast YouTube channel, which has the chat facility. This evening we have the pleasure of talking to Justin Giles-Clark. Yeah, nearly forgot your surname. VK7TW, or affectionately known as Tango Whiskers around Hobart, who's with us in the studio tonight. Good evening, Justin.
Good evening,
and welcome.
How would you be?
Very well. Yes, it's been a warm day today. It's nice and cool here in the studio.
It certainly is our wonderful new heat pump. Very good.
Yes. Good. Well, let's get into it then. So, look, we'll kick off. I think, Justin, if you could just give us a little bit of a history about yourself, and just to give us some background.
Okay. What I've done is, so that I don't forget anything, I'll just go to our... I hope this is going to work, because I didn't try this. Oh, there we go. It did work.
That's good.
It did work. I'm 54 years old, so born in October 1966, which was decimal currency year. Not June, though, when decimal currency came in, but a little bit later in that year. I have two older sisters, but 8 and 10 years older than me, so I actually grew up with 3 mums. And a dachshund as well, actually. A dachshund called Herman Punch, would you believe? That dear little dachshund. I grew up in a place called Blackwood in the Adelaide Hills in South Australia. So yes, I'm a South Australian lad. I'm a VK5 South Australian lad. My mum was originally a nurse who ended up as an artist, really wanted to be an artist for her life, and she has done all sorts of things. She has painted in oil paints, in watercolour, she has been a potter in ceramics, and has done almost everything in between. So very arty type. And a dad, Wally, who was electrical technician with started off with the Adelaide Electric Supply Company.
Yeah.
So that dates it because that's a long while ago, which became the Electricity Trust of South Australia.
Right.
So and he spent 44 years, I think 43 or 44 years basically with the same organisation, which is just outrageous these days.
Yes, she was. In those days, he had real careers, didn't she?
Correct. You actually did have real careers. So his certainly his interest, and also he started with them as an apprentice and worked his way through, all the way through to engineering. And so his interest was very much electronics and electrical bits and pieces, and ended up as an electrical inspector, where he went around and inspected safety and all sorts of stuff. And in fact, met Mum on what we called country changeover, which is where the Electricity Trust went out into the country, and all of these farms were operated by what we called wind lights, which is windmill generators. Mm-hmm. So 32 volt windmill generators. So a lot of their equipment, their refrigeration and all sorts of things were all 32 volts.
Gosh, there you go. That's interesting, because I mean, these are the sort of things we're trying to do again today.
Well and truly. So he was on York Peninsula. If you know South Australia, that's the peninsula that looks like a leg and a foot, in between St Vincent's Gulf and the Spencer Gulf. He was down there doing country changeover, and Mum was working in the chemist shop and dressing the window, and Dad was an avid photographer and took a photo of her in the window.
Oh, with her permission?
I'm not sure, but the rest, as they say, is history.
Well, there you go. Oh, that's an interesting way to meet your partner.
Well and truly. So he was based in the town for a little while, so I asked Mum for, to go out, and they had country dances and out to play tennis and all sorts of stuff, and well, as I said, the rest is history.
Yes.
So
that's fabulous.
Now, the one of the things I thought about when I was writing this was, one of the things that Dad did for me, which I will never ever forget, and I have also done a very similar thing for my son, was build me a workshop.
Your dad built you a workshop. That's so wonderful.
So it was an ex-chook shed, but it was my own shed. And basically, he said, "This is yours. You can do what you like in here, and you can build things. You can do whatever you like, but it's your shed." And it was up the back of the property at Blackwood. And I built all sorts of things and blew things up and electrocuted myself and all sorts of stuff up there. So,
well, I think not only is that brilliant for you, but I mean it probably gave your dad comfort too, that you weren't disturbing his
workshops. And can I just say, he had like 3 or 4 workshops, so it was yeah. So anyway, so. Education and work. Sorry, this is a bit of a busy slide because I just kept writing on here. I went through infant school, primary school, and high school to year 11, all at Blackwood. There was an infant school, a primary school, and a high school. In fact, the high school had 1,200 kids in it, so it was a huge high school. It was a bit like Taroona or Hobart College. It was that sort of size.
Yes.
and in fact, I met Helen. Helen also went to high school at Blackwood High School. That's where I met Helen. But
you're talking your wife, Helen?
My wife.
Okay.
We went to the same high school, but we were not. How would you say it? Not romantically coupled at that stage.
But you've known each other for a very long time.
For a long time, yes, yeah. She grew up in Belair though, which was the next suburb. That was the sort of more upmarket suburb. So, you know, she came from Belair. I was just a Blackwood lad, and she keeps reminding me that I'm a Blackwood lad as well. So, and can I just say, actually, that's one thing I forgot about. The Hilltop Hoods come from Blackwood. Would you believe?
Is that so?
And I only realised that I was listening to Triple J one day, and they were doing an interview with the Hilltop Hoods, and they were talking about they used to go to the Blackwood railway station and hang out on the platform and terrorise people and all sorts of stuff. And I did a double take, and I did a bit more research, and they do come from Blackwood. So
right,
there you go. So Blackwood boys made good. I went to Year 11, and then I started at work at a place called Microbyte Systems, and in fact I've got here what we'll do is just
so we have a box of goodies.
We have a box of goodies here, and what I also want is that and that. Great, thank you. So, what Microbyte Systems originally did, and I started with the company, and I was the third employee in the company. When I left the company 8 years later, there were 42 employees.
Right.
So a huge expansion
during the time that you were there.
During the time. Now, what we produced was this little board here, little printed circuit board, and I managed to actually pick one up, which is fantastic. Now, this little printed circuit board has an Intel 8748 on it. Now, those people who probably don't know what an 8748 is, it's a microcontroller. It has an EEPROM built into the microcontroller, but it has everything on board. So there's memory on board, there's CTC, so there's counter timers, there's a parallel in-out, there is a serial in-out on this, all built into this. And when we sort of look at the Raspberry Pi now, this was an early precursor to the Raspberry Pi. Can I just say they were a pain in the ass to program because they need 40 volts, 5 volts and 12 volts to program in sequence.
Yes.
And I actually built a programmer for them using an 8748 to program an 8748. But these interfaces were for daisy wheel typewriters, Triumph Adler daisy wheel typewriters, so German typewriters. They plugged into as a keyboard emulator. So these headers and these basically plugged in where the keyboard plugged in, and it emulated the keyboard as a printer. So you had a serial or a parallel input, and you could select that with these little dip switches, and you could then use it as a printer. You could connect it to a computer and use the daisy wheel typewriter as a printer.
Okay. So that was the interface from the output of the computer to drive a typewriter, basically.
And we made thousands of these.
Right.
And my job was basically putting them together, soldering everything, doing the testing, etc., etc. So that was my first job.
Yeah, so you had an early start in electronics as well.
Well and truly. And I got it through a friend who was a programmer who worked for the company, who was actually working on the programs for these and also another product that I'll show in a sec. So that's where I started. I then learnt how to code. Actually, I'll go into that in a sec. But Microbyte went on to produce its own, and I actually found this, would you believe? This is a faulty board, but this was our single board Z80 computer. Included everything, included the parallel, the serial I/O, 64K of memory, It had a floppy disk controller on it, and a few other bits and pieces on this board. That's a double-sided plated through-hole board that we designed. But that was produced, that used the Triumph Adelaide typewriter as the keyboard and the printer. And then you plugged a screen into this. That was the other thing. It had a video controller on it. And you plugged it in, and you could basically use it. Its trademark name was Glass Typewriter. Now, for those people who remember early computers, the Glass Typewriter used to be what they called a terminal. So early terminals were called glass typewriters because they had a glass screen as the where you could see the text
as an output.
Correct. And so this was trademark named the Glass Typewriter, and used the typewriter as the input and the printer. So that's one of the boards off of it. And again, we used to put these boards together. We used to test them. We used to go through. We had all the cases made. We'd put them in the cases and all sorts of stuff. We then progressed to producing our own PCs. Would you believe? Back in the 80s.
What is it? Just give us a year again where you were involved
In
with this.
fact, there may be a date.
So,
This is early 80s. So I started with the company in 1982. So this would have been sort of mid to late 80s, I reckon.
right.
So we then went on into the late 80s, and we were producing our own PC. This is a keyboard in it looks very much like the latest Raspberry Pi, actually. Everything old is new again. This was aimed at the education market. It was an 8088 processor, which was the NEC version. It had 3 1/4 inch disk drive, reasonable amount of memory. The power supply and everything was inside the board. We also produced another one which was called a PC230, which was a PC with SCSI drive, quick SCSI drive, and a few other innovative features, soft BIOS and a few other things. But anyway, that's Microbyte. So that was the company that I started off with. So we'll go back.
And they were in Adelaide.
They were in Adelaide, yes.
Yeah.
They were Adelaide based. And I put up there also Fred. The friendly rehabilitational and educational device.
Fred.
We produced, it was used for rehabilitation of disabled people who had motor control issues, and it was a little computer-based machine that had you could plug in a television, so it went out to a video modulator. And there were plug-in cards that you could, which had a whole lot of different games or different activities that you could actually do. That it would actually record the performance. So there were joysticks, or there was a mouth input, or there was all sorts of different input devices. And we produced that actually with government subsidy at the time for many of the rehab groups in South Australia, and absolutely fascinating project. Absolutely love that project. Whilst I was there, I cut my teeth on both microcontrollers, but also on the Z80s. So Z80s were the flavour of the month, and I even played a lot with Z8s. Now, a lot of people don't know what Z8s are. Z8 was the Z80 microcontroller. So Z8s had, very similar to the 8748, they had everything on board on a 40-pin dual inline package. The only thing was it had a multiplex bus where you would put an EEPROM on the outside. You didn't have one that actually had or the ones that had EEPROM built in were a bit too expensive. But anyway, that's another story.
Now, I'm thinking the equipment you built for the rehabilitation services, those were probably also the early days for technical equipment like that.
Well and truly. Well and truly.
So that would be breaking new ground in a certain way.
And it was. And in fact, I got some great friendships out of that still go to this day. There were a couple of engineers that came on onto that project, and I still correspond with them now. So and they were from actually DSTO. We poached them from DSTO. So being Adelaide, so yeah, they were good. But anyway, I got to 8 years with Microbyte systems, and I actually started to think I really should have done year 12. Because I was wanting to extend a little bit further. I was wanting to see what else was out in the world. And so I actually decided to leave Microbyte, and much to the shock of most people who work there, because between the boss and myself, we were the two that had lasted the 8 years, basically. But I left. I did matric year 12 at TAFE. At that stage, you could do it at TAFE.
Yeah, so that was a bit of a catch-up then, I guess.
Well,
you would have been, I guess, otherwise recognised as a very mature age student. Correct. For year 12.
Which is why I did it at TAFE, because that was where most of the mature age students went to. I actually got an award out of that, because I got the best aggregate score for 5 subjects. So, but anyway, but that was a good year. Then went on to Adelaide Uni, and I did my first year of my Bachelor of Science. Very general Bachelor of Science course at that stage, because I wasn't quite sure of what I wanted to do, but I thought it was paleontology, actually. And so I was heading in that direction. Really enjoyed that year at Adelaide Uni. If you don't know Adelaide Uni is right in the middle of Adelaide, on the banks of the Torrens River. Fantastic campus, just a really nice campus, and it has a great feel about it. Sandstone Uni, but with a really great feel. And of course, the geology. The big thing in the geology area, which has a link to Tasmania and Antarctica, is the professor of geology at I think the first professor of geology at Adelaide Uni was. Who wants to have a guess?
Let me guess. Sir Douglas Mawson.
And in fact, the geology lectures were done in the Mawson Lecture Theatre. And in fact, the funny thing is on North Terrace, which is one of the main drags in Adelaide. Which the uni sits on, there is a bust of Douglas Mawson. And every year on Douglas Mawson's birthday, we have the geology department always celebrated Dougie's birthday.
Dougie's birthday. When is his birthday roughly?
I'm actually not quite sure. I think it might be August or somewhere August, September. I think I'm not quite sure about that, but. We'll find
We'll
out.
catch up on
We'll
that.
find out. And of course they put things on the bust and put scarves and beanies on him and all sorts of stuff.
Yes, do him up a bit
on his birthday.
Oh, that's great. That's a very honourable thing to do.
And the interesting thing is, my uncle, who trained as a civil engineer, had lectures with Mawson in engineering geology, because he ran the engineering geology course. And I always remember Uncle Norm talking about the lectures that Mawson actually provided, and he was a very down-to-earth person, and didn't suffer fools very much, etc., etc. So it was
fascinating. Yeah, so you've got a bit of a family connection there with some
bit of a family. And if you're ever in Adelaide and you've got some time spare, go seek out the geology department, which is at the Torrens side of the campus, because they have a fantastic museum, geological museum.
You know what, Justin? Do they have a bit of moon rock there by any chance?
I think they might, actually.
Yes. Well, I was lucky enough to visit and enjoy Adelaide before we went into lockdown earlier this year.
Excellent.
Due to attending one of the big music festivals there. And
cool.
I visited this museum and I thought, I'm sure Justin is very familiar with this place. There you go.
Oh yeah. So it's well and truly worth having a look. There's all sorts of things in there. But anyway, so that was the my first year of my Bachelor of Science. Now, at the end of that year, during that year, I met up again with my wife-to-be, Helen Morrison, who was actually back in Adelaide after spending 3 years teaching at Devonport High School.
In Tasmania?
In Tasmania.
Okay.
She got her music degree, Bachelor of Music, at Adelaide, and got a job in Tasmania. And I used to say that I kept ANZET. Now there's a blast from the past. I kept ANZET in business because I would regularly be flying from Adelaide to Devonport.
Oh, the romance, yes.
Back and forth on a little Fokker Friendship. You'd fly into Melbourne on a 737 and then you'd fly in a little Fokker Friendship to Devonport. Anyway, at the end of that year, we actually decided that we were going to get married, and Helen actually got a job in Tasmania, back in Tasmania, would you believe, at Farm School.
Yes, which is in Hobart.
So we decided to pack up all our worldly goods into a car and a trailer and make our way to Tasmania. And it was only the day before we left to come to basically get on the overland, put the car and the trailer on the overland and come over to Melbourne. It was the day before when I got the call from UTAS to say I had a place at UTAS.
Wow, what an amazing coincidence.
And I was sweating. So anyway, we moved to Tassie. I followed Helen, and she was the breadwinner for a little while. So there you go. I transferred to UTAS. We lived in a little unit up on Mount Nelson, which was fantastic, and I completed my second and third year.
Yes. Okay. So you had to work the continuation of your studies, transferring that from Adelaide to Tasmania.
The problem was that I was planning to do paleontology, and that was not the subject that was taught at UTAS. So I had to think what I was going to do. I ended up in environmental geology and focusing on that, geochemistry and environmental geology in third year uni. I started my honours year, which was sampling sediments in Macquarie Harbour, and I well and truly know how big Macquarie Harbour is after spending a week sampling on Macquarie Harbour. And I was using electroparamagnetic resonance, would you believe, EPR, which is a very interesting technique if somebody wants to talk to me about that at some stage.
So it's an instrument of some sort?
It's an instrument of some sort, and we were using it to sample the sediments out into Macquarie Harbour to see how far the tailings out of the King River had gone.
Okay, yeah. We're talking, of course, the wild west coast of Tasmania.
Correct. And I spent a week on a boat. We were on the harbour before the sun rose, so I got some fantastic sunrises, and we were on the harbour when the sun set, so I got some fantastic sunsets. That was a fairly challenging week, but we then brought that all back. Now, unfortunately, at about early in that year, Helen lost her job.
What? Oh.
This was when Farn went through a bit of a problem. So I had to very quickly get a job, which I did. I fell back onto my IT experience and got a job with the state government, with the Department of Premier and Cabinet in their IT area that had 3 people in it. And it's now got over 20 in IT.
Yeah, so what year would we be looking at here then?
We're at 90. We're at 93. 93 or 94,
Yeah.
93,
Mhm.
94. No, it'd be 94.
Okay, yeah. Mhm.
94. So anyway, so that was the start of my foray into IT. I moved into and out of IT a few times. I had an opportunity with the Public Sector Management Office as in a policy role, which I really enjoyed. Then I went across to Department of Health and Human Services, doing a review of their HR area, which was really good. In PSMO, I got an opportunity, which is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, to be part of a team that introduced the new Tasmanian State Service Act.
Mm-hmm.
And we were part of the team that actually introduced that to the state service. So I actually count that is well and truly a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that you get to be a part of the team that does that. So and it was a great experience. And then I ended up back in DPAC actually, and that's where I am right at the moment. So yeah, that's education and work.
Yes, so it's really, I guess with your IT skills, that also that allowed you to start in the public service system here in Tasmania.
Well and truly.
You worked your way through some interesting offices.
Well and truly.
Yeah, and okay, well that's that certainly is an interesting history of how you got to Tasmania and got to be in the public service. I guess, of course, we know you well as for maybe your biggest hobby being amateur radio, but also you have other beyond amateur radio and the public service work. You've got other interests and hobbies.
Just a few.
I think you probably, I don't know if this is through Helen or just on your own, but you are very musically inclined.
Not as much as Helen, I'll tell you.
I certainly have picked up that you know your way around music instruments, what they are, and pieces of music that have been produced. And I believe you were in a choir for a while too.
Yes, a gospel choir actually.
Gospel choir.
Specifically gospel choir, the Southern Lights, which way back when, would you believe, the Festival of Voices was in its infancy, so the very first one, I was involved with that and was in a group called the Southern Lights, which is gospel music is fantastic, great for the soul.
Are they linked with a gospel church somewhere in Hobart?
No, we not that I was aware of, but we did used to practice in a lot of churches around Hobart, and I participated in some fantastic workshops with a guy from Sydney called Tony Backhouse, who used to come down, and I think he probably still comes down, and runs gospel singing workshops for whoever's interested. And I also did some workshops with, I don't know whether people know, the Spooky Men.
Yes.
Now the Spooky Men, Stephen Taberner, who's another guy from Sydney, runs the Spooky Men. Now the Spooky Men have been to Cygnet quite a few times, and in fact Tony Backhouse has been to Cygnet as well, Cygnet Folk Festival. The Spooky Men are a group of guys who sing. They sing all sorts of stuff, actually, anything and everything, and also original pieces. There was Vote the Bastards Out. That was a good song. That was a very good song.
I think they also have a song
politically
advising people not to get between a man and his tools.
Oh, that's it. Yes, yeah. Yes. So the Spooky Men ran some workshops here as well, which I participated in after Cygnet. But fantastic. It's just for those who don't sing or whatever, just give it a try sometime. I can guarantee you'll probably love it.
Yes, well, I can concur there. I'm not into choir myself, but I have seen these guys, and it was probably Festival of Voices here, and yes, no, fascinating. A great group.
And the thing I love about it is a cappella, which if you go to the root of that word means singing unaccompanied. So there isn't there aren't instruments involved. The instrument is your voice, and the voice is a fantastic instrument and has an incredible range. And when you sing in a choir where there are 4 or 5 more parts, and it comes together, the hair stands up on the back of your neck. So yeah, really, really good.
No, I can imagine that'd be a wonderful experience to be involved in.
Well and truly.
And I also believe you've utilized multi-million-dollar satellite technology to find Tupperware containers in remote bush locations. Yes. What's this all about?
Oh, that was that's called geocaching.
Geocaching.
And I went through a bit of a phase, and in fact, Ruben and I still have caches out and about in South Hobart that we maintain. So there are some caches out there that you maintain. Geocaching uses GPS location type technology and puzzles as well. It's not just using the GPS to find a location. A lot of the geocaches have things that you've got to work out to then find the location or create the location. And then you go looking for a cache hidden, which is the Tupperware container or a waterproof container out in the middle of nowhere or up a tree or under a bridge or somewhere. It's all this sort of stuff. So, and it's just it's good fun. It's and you've got to go into stealth mode if there's lots of muggles around. If you're into Harry Potter, muggles are non-wizards. And there's a whole social group that they go out on geocaching days and all sorts of things. So it's good fun.
Yeah. So I guess the success in finding a geocache is you locate a lunchbox that has a logbook in it, and you can sign that off, and you start looking for the next one.
Yeah. and a website, you can go to the website and log that you've found the cache and all of that sort of stuff, and leave the person whose cache it is some messages and all sorts of, and you can put things in the cache. You can leave some stuff in the cache for other people to collect, and there's geo coins that you can drop in the cache that can then get in fact there are coins and items that go all around the world, because a geocacher here who visits another country picks up a coin here and takes it to another geocache in another country and drops it in that geocache, and it gets logged, and there are coins and items that have gone all around the world. There's even geocaches that there are even coins and that have gone to the International Space Station.
There you go. So, the International Space Station. We'll come back to that.
Yeah.
Yes. I've been interested through you actually, Justin, in geocaching, so I've got to thank you for that.
Don't curse me.
No, it's a fun way to get out and about. Now, of course, of all these different hobbies and interests that you've got, I think the biggest one that you're mostly committed to is amateur radio. And amateur radio is very big, very involved these days, with so many different avenues to pursue.
Oh, true.
So how did you originally get involved with amateur radio?
Okay, I'm going to go back to my slide here, and a little bit about my inspirations. And this one might appeal to Rex as well, because I came across this in doing some research. My biggest inspiration was my old man. That's Wally on the screen, and in fact he's holding. I actually have. He's holding. Would you believe?
very piece of equipment.
One of my prized possessions. This is a 6-metre transmitter, AM transmitter, built in 1950s style. So it's all open chassis with coils and bits and pieces. The power supply plugs in here. I have got the power supply. The transmitting valve and the driver valves. I love there's some plates that are fabricated on either side of the valve to I assume cut down the I don't know, parasitic oscillations or something in the valve. So somebody out in the other room will be able to tell me this. But this is his 6-metre AM and the crystal socket.
So your dad built this?
I built this, well and truly. He was very into the Magic Band in the 50s, which when sunspot cycles were absolutely off the show, and he built. He originally him and his best mate, and anybody who may be listening from South Australia will know the name Geoff Taylor VK5TY, who was Dad went through school with at Black Forest Primary School. And lived basically a couple of streets away from Geoff, and they played with, before they were ever into amateur radio in the 1940s, they actually played with light beam communications, would you believe, across the backyards, using incandescent globes and reflectors, vehicle headlight reflectors. So they were into it in the 1940s. Dad became an amateur in 1957. He was a Z-Call VK5 ZEH. He actually studied amateur radio at the Marconi School in Adelaide.
Oh, okay.
So the Marconi course, amateur radio course, and then he got his Z-Call, and he went on to do the television course. Hang on,
1957, you say?
1957, and he went on to then do the Marconi television course, because in 1957 that was when television was becoming available, and it was transmissions were starting, and in fact he built a television as part of the Marconi television course, because that was part of the course. That we watched the moon landings on in 69. In 69.
A home-built television, a homebrew television.
Yes.
And was that very one you watched the moon landing on?
Correct.
Wow.
And I don't remember the moon landing at all because I was only 3, but what I do remember is being told to stop standing in front of the television.
Excellent.
Because I make a better door than a window.
Oh, this 3-year-old toddlers, yeah.
That's the bit I do remember. I don't remember the moon landing at all. But I do remember being probably sworn at because I kept standing in front of the television.
Oh, you weren't filming the dish at the time, were you?
I don't know. But anyway, that's an early memory. Now, the joke that Dad talks about is he actually sat his Morse code exam 6 times.
Oh, yeah.
And he was accused by the radio inspector of going to the exams for practice. And so he finally got it, and he put in for VK5TT because he was motorbike mad. And so TT stands for time trial, the TTs.
Oh, yes, okay.
And he wanted VK5TT, but he was allocated VK5TW. And he always thought that was a conspiracy theory against him. And in fact, it was Rob Gurr, VK5RG, who's still alive, who was the RI at the time. And he swears blind that it was not a conspiracy theory, but Dad took that to his grave. He thought it was a conspiracy theory. And he was given VK5TW because it was tangled whiskers, which is where I get it from. So
Tangled whiskers.
Tangled
Yes.
whiskers.
Well, you've had so it's not only the ham radio, but also the motorbike enthusiasm you've got from your father. Then,
Yeah. Because I rode a motorbike for a very long time. Motorbikes. Yes.
Oh, okay. Any of noteworthy ones?
Well, my last bike that I actually sold just before I got married because I needed the money, and the funny thing was, Dad did exactly the same thing. He sold his Norton International just before he got married because he needed the money. So my last bike was a very nice Kawasaki GPZ 750. Which was the last of the air-cooled versions, if you know that, four-cylinder inline 750.
Yes.
That in the red, silver, and black livery. That thing went like the hammers. I love that bike. Anyway, so Dad was a real experimenter, and you can see he's actually holding the 6 metre.
6 metre there. Yes.
There, that was a bit of. He was doing a show and tell at the QRP, the VK QRP.
So back in his days when he built this, I mean, when he built this, television only just existed then. Perhaps.
Well and truly. That was in the late 50s, and he absolutely loved 6 metres. That was his band, and always had at least a 3-element beam up wherever he went to see what he could pick up on 6 metres. He absolutely loved the G5RV, which I have to say that's why I've got a G5RV in the backyard. The 102-foot dipole for HF. The other inspirations that I had was Geoff Taylor. Geoff Taylor, I did a number of months with Geoff because Geoff was one of the few places in Adelaide where he ran an amateur radio course.
Okay.
Once a week and on a night, you would go to Geoff's place and he would go through each aspect that you had to know. Geoff was an absolute educator, and I don't know how many people he actually educated and elmed, but it would be in the hundreds, if not thousands, in Adelaide.
And you went to Geoff?
I went to Geoff. I spent a couple of months with Geoff, and then, in fact, I think that might be the next slide. I then did a whole lot of study myself, and I'll show you what I actually studied because there's a little bit of a story with it as well. The other person who I would have to say was a bit of an inspiration when I got here is Richard Rogers.
Yes.
VK7RO, and he's still an inspiration to me. I absolutely love Richard. He's a true amateur experimenter. And of course I cannot leave out Rex, who is many of our inspirations in the microwave space, VK7MO. And also going to Gips Tech, and Rex was the one who got me along to Gips Tech, and I love Gips Tech. It's a fantastically inspirational conference. The other person at Gips Tech that really made an impression on me was, and unfortunately he's silent key now, is Neil Sandford. He proved to me that microwave experimentation was not a black art.
As many people like to see it.
Correct. And Neil was the original tinkerer in, we've got this bit of equipment, we can actually move it to the amateur bands and, get the hacksaw out and you can cut this and you can do this and you can rebend this and you can, and I absolutely took a lot of inspiration from Neil Sandford and was a real inspiration, and unfortunately he's silent key. So that's, and I probably left a whole lot of people out there, but that's so. Just quickly, I studied with Geoff, which that was in the 1980s.
Okay. Yeah.
I used now the book, that book there. So, sorry, I'm jumping around here. Amateur Radio and Electronic Study Guide by Ian Ridpath, who was at the time ZL1 BCG. So it actually came out of New Zealand. It was sold by Dick Smith.
Oh, yes.
And the format of it, I absolutely, it was a format that gelled with me. It is all hand drawn, and it's like lecture notes. And he goes through each aspect. There's a little, if you see, there's a little flag that comes up on some pages. There we go, the PO flag here. Which is post office flag, so this is something you need to know.
The important bit.
The important bit. And it's an advanced, it's for advanced, so and I would read this religiously on my way to and from on the train. I caught the train to work each day, and I would be reading, my head down, reading this on the way to and from work every day. And that's how I actually ended up studying, along with doing some time with Geoff Taylor, and then actually going through this from one cover to another. Now, the interesting story about this was I put on my QRZ page that I used this Ian Ridpath book, and guess who I got an email from? Ian Ridpath, who's no longer in New Zealand, was in... Actually, I think he was in the UK. He spent some time in Australia, and I don't know whether he's back in Australia or not, but I think he emailed me from the UK and said, just making contact, and I really love to hear that you found this useful. So
he came across your QRZ page.
And jumped the ZL1 BCG, which is I put his call sign on there, and ended up contacting me. So I just outrageous.
That's like coming full circle, isn't it?
Well, truly. So that's and he produced a second volume as well, which went into phase lock loops and digital and a whole lot of other much more advanced electronics techniques, which I managed to get a copy of. So and I still, as you can see, there's lots of very well thumbed and lots of little tags in there and lots of post-it notes and all sorts of stuff in there. I still go back to that book more often than not.
Yes, no, I can see why it gelled with you. The illustrations are just very appealing, and the way it's all hand drawn, hand written.
Well and truly,
amazing.
It's just
what a great piece of work.
It's just great, and it just gelled with me. So anyway, I used that now. So I used Ian Ridpath. I sat my exam, so my advanced exam in 1986. I chickened out of the Morse code. on the day, I admit that. On the day, I actually booked to do the Morse code, and I did the assessment, the advanced assessment, and I went, I don't want to do the Morse.
So you weren't inclined to practice your Morse code during assessments?
No. So I just went, no, I'm not sitting right, and I put in for my Z call, which I got, which was VK7ZJV. I moved to VK7, and honestly, my father and I built the Dick Smith Commander kits, which were the 2 meter transceivers that Dick Smith actually created a kit for. Both Dad and I built one of those and got them working, and in fact I still have mine. And that was about all the amateur radio that I did at the time. I was much more into the computers and the digital side of it. The other thing we built was packet modems, which I've still got, using the World Radio chip, for those people out there who remember that. And I got into packet radio, and because it was connecting a computer to a radio, so that's what appealed to me. But then I moved to VK7. I transferred the call to VK7ZTW, and I got back into it actually. I put up a dipole in the backyard. Sunspots were not bad at that stage, in the early 1990s, and I did lots of HF DX calls on 15 metres and 18 metres and all sorts of stuff. I did 5 words a minute, VK7KTW for a very short period of time, and then did my 10 words a minute. Both of those were done. The assessor was Mike Jenner. If you're listening, Mike.
Good evening, Mike.
So, and got my 10 words a minute in 2001, because in 2002, I think it was, the Morse code requirement was removed.
After all that,
I better do it because it's about to be removed. So anyway.
Well, us local hams here in Hobart certainly all know Mike Jenner very well.
Definitely.
But I never knew that he did your assessment in Morse code.
He was an assessor. He was an accredited assessor for the WIA.
There you go.
So and he's not bad on a key. So I don't know how long since he's been on a key, but he's not bad on a key. So there you go. So the other stuff, just quickly, the other stuff. For those who don't know, I was WIA president from 2017 to 19, so that was an interesting 2 years. I'm an assessor, was an assessor for the WIA and also and now for the AMC, and in fact did an assessment last night down at Huonville for one of the scouts down there. So fingers crossed. I was involved in 2006 with the BPL fight, so the broadband over power lines trial that was down here, which was absolutely horrific. And in fact, they are still the highest rating videos on my YouTube channel. They've had a huge number of hits, and I still get comments about them, which is interesting. And Alshaw Smith, which is the publishing award for AR magazine. The first one with Rex, which was the Echoes of Apollo. So a shout out to Rex, who I think's out there. That was with Rex, and then in 2012 I got another one for a review of amateur radio technology and a bit of a future article about where I think it was going. So anyway.
Yeah, well, that's fascinating. No, well, I can certainly assure our viewers your involvement here in Hobart. I think you were probably quite active with the local group before it became Reast, when it was known as Wireless Institute of Australia Southern Branch.
Yeah.
And then their transition to the WIA and the formation then of the local group becoming the Radio and Electronics Association of Southern Tasmania. And I think it wasn't too long after that. I think it was probably not too long then after that you produced the YouTube videos, the BPL ones.
Correct.
And that's when I started, I learned about Reast and started coming to Reast, and even though I knew about amateur radio, I think coming to the club up here and getting to know the members of the club inspired me then to eventually get my license.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So,
cool.
Yeah, I have to thank you very much for that, as well as
APL to thank.
But
I've got a funny story about that too. Can I just relay? At the end of the BPL trial, towards the end of the BPL trial, they actually hung fibre in my street for the BPL trial and put up a whole lot of BPL infrastructure, and I just went, there goes my hobby. And I took a whole lot of there's some other videos that are up there around what I was experiencing at home in the shack, and I thought, oh, that's it. Now the BPL trial, the business case didn't stack up. They closed the trial. And I thought, okay, so they're going to pull out all of the infrastructure, including the fibre that was hung on the poles, etc., etc. Guess what the NBN took over when they rolled out the NBN? They adopted all of the fibre, and so we were one of the first suburbs in Hobart to get NBN rolled out because of the BPL fibre.
which was left behind and reactivated.
So
Okay.
there was a good thing that came out of the BPL trial.
But tell me, I recall a short story where you, for some reason, attended a meeting that included people who had interests in the BPL. And came across your video, and I think I don't know whether maybe it was just a social dinner or so, but these were original broadband over power line supporters, and here they are meeting the very person that took these rather interesting YouTube videos driving up Nelson Road.
Well, yeah, it was a slightly more than that. I changed my job and came back to I mentioned coming back to Premier and Cabinet into a job back into an IT job, and my boss was the person who was running the trial in Aurora.
Oh yes, okay.
Who I got to know quite well, and we had many talks about the BPL trial and all sorts of things. So, yeah, what goes around comes around.
I guess it's all history now.
It is well and truly history, and Hobart is a very small place.
That's for sure.
So yeah, Hobart's a very small place.
Yeah, no, very good. Well, it now a lot of hams here in Hobart. They pursue one or the other style of amateur radio activity, but you've been one who's always been keen to pick up on the newest and latest things and give them a go. And I think some of them you still work with, others you've tried them and moved on from them. Mm-hmm. Give us an overview of the different technologies or modes that you've been involved with.
Lots, and in fact, shout out to Richard here, because I was really into satellites for a little while. And in fact made lots of great contacts on satellites, the RS satellites, and the precursors to the AOs and all of that, a few of the AOs. That was good fun, and I built some satellite antennas and all sorts of things and played in that space, and occasionally I do still listen to satellites. In fact, that's how I ended up with an FT847, a Yaesu FT847, because I reviewed what was available and ended up with an 847, and they were called the Earth Station. Actually, they were marketed as the Earth Station. Because they had all the satellite functionality, where you could reverse couple and all sorts of stuff, the UHF, VHF channels and all sorts of things. So was into that. Don't tend to be into that terribly much these days, but I still do every so often listen for satellites and all sorts of things. I got into weather satellites for a little while there, and downloading the weather pictures as the NOAA satellites went over. That was good fun. I got into, and I'm still involved with 630 metres. So when 630 metres was given to us a few years ago, I went, "Ooh, this sounds really, really good." So got into that, built some transmitters. I have a transmitter sitting on the bench as well, a scary transmitter, which is probably why I'm procrastinating. But still into 630 metres. I listen on 630 metres on Whisper 2 every night, or in fact 24 hours a day. So if you're experimenting on 630 metres, transmit a Whisper 2 signal and then have a look at the Whisper logger, and you might see a decode.
I understand your kind neighbours allowed you to run your 630 antenna.
Correct. I have a Marconi T, so 10 metres vertical and then about 20 metres of horizontal wires. And my next door neighbours are wonderful, I have to say, are wonderful. Allow me to do all sorts of things. Allow me to put a earth dipole down their fence, because they have a much longer fence line than I have, and they do support me in the hobby quite dramatically. They call me a terrorist, but that's another thing. So they are wonderful. But so 630 metres, and 630 metres still holds a lot of interest for me right at the moment. So that's good. Microwaves, thanks to Rex, I certainly have a 1296, so 23 centimetre, a 3.4 gig station, although it's a bit deaf right at the moment, and also 10 gigs, a number of dishes, and in fact plans for dishes. So and that's what led me into the satellite, the azimuth and elevation controller. What else?
Well, that's
DMR hotspots.
Yes, the new stuff. Yes,
the new stuff.
Yes.
The Aussie 705. Still playing with that. That's a pretty amazing rig, and still finding new stuff on the rig.
So this is equipment that really is hot off the press now. That's only come out a month or two ago, I think.
And I've already used it a couple of times in anger for soda activations. So that's and really impressed. So really, really nice little rig.
Now, give us you've also had experience. Talking to astronauts and arranging for school children to talk to them.
Well,
tell us about that.
Back when my son was in South Hobart Primary School, and my son is 18 now, so however long ago that was, who has just done his first exam, Year 12 exam, so today. But he and his class, they decided that they wanted to try for a ISS contact, for an ARIS amateur radio on the International Space Station contact. So we filled out all the paperwork, and I liaised with Tony VK5ZAI, Tony Hutchison, and you never quite know when it's going to happen. Because they put all the paperwork in, and it gets scheduled, and it has to go through whole lots of layers of bureaucracy and all sorts of stuff, and then you get the call to say it's happening on, and you've got about a week, and so everybody sort of takes a big deep breath, and we get everything together, and so we did that contact. It's available on my YouTube channel. That contact where all the kids ask the questions, and it just every time I watch that, and every time I watch an ISS contact with a school, it just I end up very emotional because it is actually the essence of what amateur radio is all about. And I watch those sort of things, and I just go, yeah, this is what it is all about. It is really about, you have astronauts who have been through huge amounts of training. You've got an ISS that is, an incredible device spinning at 28,000 kilometres around the globe. You've got all the technology to connect them to the ground and to connect to this school, and they are very happy to answer all of these questions that these kids throw at them.
Yeah, so that's quite a feat. I mean, you really are bringing two extremes together, these highly trained, specialized people out in space to communicate with these young school children, and there is common ground.
Correct.
Between these two extremes, yes.
So it's just
wonderful.
It's just fantastic, and I those kids who I am still, Ruben is still friends with quite a few of them, still remember that and still talk about it. And so,
excellent.
So yeah, it's just that was a really, really special event.
Yeah, I can sense it's been one of the big highlights.
Just really good.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess moving on then. Other activities. You've been into outdoors stuff, SOTA, horses, I believe.
Yep.
And you're a member of Wyson as well.
Well and truly. Love the portable activations and making things work portable, because there are a whole lot of other challenges that kick in when you try and do portable activations. And the going out into the bush, into the middle of nowhere, and setting up radio contacts so you can talk to base, and as the horses go past, and the thing I love about the horses is you can actually talk to the person and have a conversation with them, and if you're into horses you can pat the horse or do whatever, all that sort of stuff. And you're also providing a service for them which they do really appreciate, as in the safety communications that go with that. So really enjoy getting out there, and we were out at Pyengana. I know Anthony VK7LAG's out next door, and was involved for the first time at Pyengana the other couple of weeks ago. So that was really good. And Wyson also get involved with the Scouts and JOTA and activities like that. And we were providing comms for their big event up at Oatlands, the Ernest Clark Trophy, where they all go, which I think actually the off year that happens is happening this weekend up at Forth, just outside Devonport. So the other activity that goes on in the intervening years is happening up at Forth this weekend.
I believe a lot of Wyson members from the local Wyson group help out with comms during Targa events.
Targa fires. We've helped out the TFS.
The Tasmania Fire Service, as volunteer radio communications.
Radio operators, so and learnt all sorts of things out of that. We learnt about flight following and how to do it on radio, and so we're talking to the helicopter pilots and making sure that they are getting where they have to get to, and if there's any issues and all of that sort of stuff. So you get to do some really impressive stuff and some really amazing stuff. So
that's great. Okay, well, of course, I think we would like to see where a lot of your ham stuff happens.
Yeah, this is a bit scary, and I'm not quite sure how this is going to
work. So, someone who's been so dedicated and so involved with amateur radio will have quite a complex ham radio shack, if I may put it that way.
Now, what I'm going to have to do here, what I've done is a virtual tour of the shack. Mm-hmm. So we'll just bear with me, because I just have to just get this going. Just bear with me.
Yep, well, I'll just remind our viewers that there are different ways of sending in your questions or any comments available via our local repeater and the DMR group, the DMR group 3807, and of course on our streaming YouTube channel there's a chat facility, so be ready to submit your questions and comments.
Okay, now I think this is going to work, but I'm not quite sure. Just bear with me. All right. So there's a bit of commentary that goes with this. Okay, when we renovated, Helen has a music room. This is her teaching area, and then I've got the shack up here. So we'll head up the stairs, and okay, so this is my my design, planning, meditation / test equipment / everything else area. The equipment rack, and around to my main computer area. You can see there's all the components and bits and pieces there, various bits and pieces. We head around here. This is the main development area, and just turn around the equipment rack. So there's the spec and the generators, the oscilloscopes, bits and pieces. Well, there's a computer there as well. Oh, and an accordion, one row accordion that I'm trying to learn. Trying, emphasis on trying. So down here, this is the main operating area. You can see there's a variety of valve and transistorized equipment. The 847 there on the operating bench. There's the HP SDR sitting there. And there's a couple of HP SDRs sitting there as well that I connect to via Linux and the Pi HP SDR. The main computer area, and then my bookshelf and bits and pieces, which have got all sorts of stuff there, as well as some handhelds and bits and pieces. So that's the shack. What's on the bench? What I'm playing with right at the moment, apart from the end-fed half-wave, which is just there, which we've been featuring on the ATV nights, what we're doing right at the moment is coming up with a Arduino interface, RS485 interface, using an Arduino to control a Pelco pan PTZ camera, so pan, tilt and zoom camera, which is an upgrade for the studio. We've got a couple of these coming our way, and so this little controller, very neat little Pelco controller commands that enable us to control the PTZ function on the camera. So just working on that right at the moment. There's a few other things on the bench. There's the battery pack, which we featured the other day, and all sorts of bits and pieces. Recycling. There's a Raspberry Pi under there with a DVB-T hat on it, which I really want to play with. But anyway, there's all sorts of stuff going on the bench, including the power supply project we've got going on right at the moment, to come up with some PCBs to plug into those edge card connectors. We've got quite a few of these which have come out of my place of employ, and we have a club project to convert them to power supplies that amateurs can use in a safe way. So anyway, that's
that's what the shack looks like. A whirlwind quick tour, and there's various things on the floor, and HPSDRs and 1296 amplifiers, and another camera there that we're putting into the club rooms, which has got it's a Sony Visca interface, a Polycom. So we've got another Arduino project going on there. So anyway, that's the shack. Whisper on 630 meters going there. So that's the shack, and back to the studio.
Welcome to the Digital Amateur Television Experiment.
What an impressive shack there, Justin.
What a messy shack. Anyway.
But you know, not everybody has the luxury of their own four walls to spread out their shack as they like. No, lucky man.
Well, we when we renovated downstairs, we purposely designed into the renovations an area for Helen's music room and an area for my shack. And so there were two things which were not negotiables in the renovations. So, and I think I have to think from in retrospect, that was the right thing to do. It was actually the right decision. So there you go.
So, yeah. No, well done. Yes. Okay. Well. This has been a fascinating evening. I can't think of any further ground that we have not possibly covering, and thank you very much for being the guest.
No problem.
And sharing your life and your amateur radio hobby. With our viewers.
No problems at all. Thanks, Warren.
My pleasure.
Okay. Cheers. Let's go.